This is Motovore, I'm Tushar, and today I'm in Pune, but I wish I wasn't because today I have to return the Triumph Bobber. First off, yes, that Triumph Bobber is absolutely filthy, and I'm not going to apologize for it because that means I've been riding it. And this is a bike you really want to ride. I'm not being disingenuous when I say I am not happy about being in Pune today, because I'm genuinely not, because I don't want to give this up. This motorcycle is really fun to ride. So what do we have here? Well, this is part of the Bonneville family, the modern classic Bonneville family, motorcycles that are meant to look a certain way but not necessarily ride in that certain way. So this is obviously a bobber. When I say bobber, so it draws its name from that, which is a sort of bobbed off fender which stops halfway there instead of it typically ending up there. It's a single seater. This is not a motorcycle with the pillion pad simply removed. This is a genuine single seater. You cannot actually attach any sort of seat for a pillion passenger. That's how it's designed, that's what it's meant to look like, and that's what it's meant to ride like. It is part of the Bonneville family, but so much engineering has gone into this that it may as well be an all-new motorcycle. Superficially, the chassis looks the same apart from that entire rear, almost cage-like swing arm that you see there. The whole concept of a bobber is that you've got that chopped off rear mudguard, you've got the large exposed wheels, and you've got something that looks like a hardtail, a motorcycle that basically has a chassis with no rear suspension. But Triumph has done something fairly clever. They've got that monoshock hidden away under the seat. Well, you can't really say it's hidden away because I don't think they're making too many bones about the fact that it actually does have a suspension. It's there, it looks nice, it looks part of the design, and that seat certainly looks the business. So yeah, you've got a retro looking modern classic bobber. We think this looks like nothing else on the market. Sure, you could buy certain cruisers without a rear seat and you could sort of approximate this, but this whole design with the 16-inch rear wheel, the 19-inch front wheel, the bar end mirrors, the simple elemental design, it's just the business. There's a lot to like about the Triumph Bobber, but to be fair, it's not a bike for everyone. For starters, there's just the single seat. So essentially, it's for a rider who's single and doesn't care, or married and doesn't care. Basically, for somebody who doesn't care, which is, I guess, what makes it a little bit badass. I think it's a fairly individual motorcycle. It certainly doesn't look like anything else on the market. It's not a particularly young motorcycle in the way that it's not hectic. It's fairly relaxed. The way it rides, the way it handles, it's for somebody who has a more considered way of riding. You can be the sexiest uncle at the bakery with this motorcycle. So what's the motor like? Well, there's no way to describe it except for creamy. This is a 1200cc parallel twin motor, but it's just so smooth and silky and so feeling well connected to your right wrist that it's a different experience. Pretty much every RPM, no matter what gear you're in, you twist the throttle and you're where you need to be. And not in an urgent, frantic sort of way. It's just got a reserved strength and class that you don't normally get in motorcycles of this capacity. You could try V-twin or L-twin motors, but even they have a certain roughness which is absolutely not present over here. It's like the best Shrikhand you've ever tasted. This is the sweet Shrikhand of justice. The gearbox is a 6-speed, and again, it's extremely sophisticated. It feels very positive. I haven't had a single miss shift in my entire week of riding this motorcycle. Blipping on downshifts feels very satisfying, very positive again. Positive is the key word here. The gears, it doesn't even feel like you need 6 gears. There are 6 gears in this, and the only way I know that is because I have on occasion actually seen the gear indicator on the console say 6. That said, getting into 6th gear, I mean, it's such a tall gear and you've got so much torque that you really don't need it most of the time. Usually I'm sort of trundling around in 5th and I'm perfectly happy, and I just don't really see the need to get into 6th gear most of the time. And it's just incredible the way the roll-on performances of this motorcycle. You could be in whatever gear you are, you see somebody you need to be overtaking, you just roll on the throttle and it's done. You're ahead of whatever traffic you need to be ahead of. It feels really satisfying to ride. Now the downsides. That seat and suspension is not going to do you any favors. I am 65 kilos light, so it works for me. But that said, if you're ever going to be riding on monsoon broken tarmac, or in Mumbai as we know it as tarmac, you're going to have a bad time. The suspension does bounce a fair bit and it can be fairly hard on your back, and the feedback I've got from heavier riders is that it's much worse, to the point of perhaps being uncomfortable. For me, for lighter riders, it doesn't seem to be a problem. I also wasn't able to find any sort of adjustment for the rear shock, so that's going to be a concern, because this spring is not going to suit every single weight. That said, for my weight, I wasn't able to really upset the motorcycle in any way. I've ridden it to and from Pune now in this past week, and it's done an admirable job. Concrete roads are a bit of a concern because it tends to bounce around a little bit, but again, the general neutralness of the handling of this motorcycle is such that it basically wants to go in a straight line no matter what you're doing. So you could basically go into the largest pothole you could possibly find and it will slam into it, get out, you're going to be bouncing around, but the bike essentially is going on its own merry way. So just hold on and you'll be fine. I think it's also really important to note just how much care they've taken in the finer details of this motorcycle. For example, that motor, it looks like a traditional motor. It looks like a motor on a motorcycle that a child would draw. But if you take a closer look at the front, that is a tall radiator. So this is actually a liquid cooled motorcycle. It looks like an air cooled motorcycle, but it is liquid cooled. Take a look at that. You've got a little heat sink around the header pipe, just like bikes of old. It may or may not do anything in this case, but it certainly looks the business. You've got a very traditional looking header pipe ending in a very sexy, fat, almost straight pipe looking exhaust. It really sounds nice. It's got a deep, throaty, bassy sort of note, which does not have that broken brap sort of quality of larger V-twin cruisers, but it's certainly something that stirs something inside you. I have no complaints about the sound of this motorcycle. Back to the details. Take a look at the metal bits. You've got sort of satin finish metal parts. These are not just cast for their aesthetic value. They're obviously functional parts of the engine casing, but the amount of detail and the amount of effort taken to make them look sort of harking back to a different age is significant. You can see that on both sides of the motorcycle. It just looks like it should be coming out of the 60s. Those are the, in quotes, carburetors. This is a fuel injected motorcycle, but those are meant to look like the carburetors on an old British motorcycle. That's a lot of care. Even the console, it's fairly simple. Let's turn it on for you. It does what it's supposed to. But it looks the part, and it's also clever. Depending on how tall you are, you might want to sort of push it down like that or pull it up that way, and it stays in place. No rattling, no stray, no drift, nothing. You've got the classic tiny metal domed headlight, which unfortunately is not very good at night. I would say the suspension and the headlight are probably the only two compromises in favor of form that this motorcycle has. Which brings me to the handling. That's a 19-inch front wheel. It's spoked, it's heavy, and it feels like it. The bike has this sort of gyroscopic ability to stand up, which means that when you're corner carving or trying to corner carve, it's going to want to go wide. You've got to really sort of push your weight towards the inside of the corner, and you've got to actually counter steer consciously to get this thing to turn properly. That said, it carries its weight, and I would estimate it's 230-250 kilos. It carries its weight very low, so it feels like one of those kids' toys which perhaps you had if you were my age group, which you're probably not because you're watching video. Which you punch and it sort of stands up again. It kind of feels like that. It just wants to stand up all the time. You can let your arms go at any point, and it's doing its own thing. If you had cruise control, this would be an autonomous vehicle. Bobber to me is a very impressive motorcycle. It's sexy, it's quick, it's fast. It'll do 200 kilometers per hour if you want it to, but it's the sort of motorcycle that you want to sort of sit at 100 kilometers per hour and just enjoy the ride. I actually found myself sort of leaning my elbow on my knee. Don't do that. Just don't do that. But you actually have the capability and calm with this motorcycle to sort of take things in. You can be Maximus and sort of trip in your mind and move your hands on that dry grass. It feels like that sort of motorcycle. It feels like it's got oodles and oodles of capability left over. This is the motorcycle you should definitely buy the moment you get divorced. That said, if you aren't divorced and you do intend to buy a motorcycle that looks like this, we believe Triumph is actually working on a 2-seat model of this. So if that's your thing, then you're going to have to wait a while. But for now, big thumbs up.